You are listening to the Partner Up podcast by Welcome to Bundaberg. I'm Gayle Reynolds, and in this series you will hear from community leaders who are kicking big collaborative working together goals. We will highlight the successful partnerships, shedding light on the positive impact they have had on both businesses and the community. Welcome to Bundaberg aims to improve the health and well-being, work and lifestyle outcomes for people living in Bundaberg by activating and implementing a range of community-led strategies across a range of services for a more connected, cohesive community. Let's go. Before we start today's episode, I would like to acknowledge country. I would like us to take a moment to reflect on the meaning of place and connection. In the spirit of reconciliation, I wish to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands on which we live, work and love on. I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging of all the lands, and I extend that respect to all First Nations peoples listening today. Hello everyone, welcome to the podcast and the recording today. I am joined by a very special guest, Cat Matson from Impactful Projects and Impactful Presenters. I've been working with Cat for probably a little bit over a year. We first met, and in this episode of Community Centred Solutions, I asked Cat to join the conversation and just see where it lands and takes us. So I would love for Cat to introduce herself because I don't think I would do it justice. So please tell everyone who you are.
Thank you, Gayle. It's awesome to be here. And who am I and what do I do? Well, as you said, my name's Cat. My primary business or my company is called Impactful Projects. And one of the things that I do within that is run the Impactful Presenters program, which is a suite of programs that empower community leaders and other, I say, corporate hippies or humble leaders to find their own magic so they can speak with confidence, authority and impact and make the dent that they want to make in the universe. I have a ridiculously broad and varied background. I could say it was a checkered history. It's not really. Checkered sounds like it's a bit naughty, but I've done everything from character waitressing to running a small business to working in an accounting firm to running a software, like a social media software startup, to being partners in a marketing agency, as well as spending now the best part of 10 years in the public sector in local government and running my own businesses. I've also, in fact, my first ever professional role was sitting in a organisation that was running pre-employment training programs for long-term unemployed youth. So when I say I've had a varied background, I really, truly have. But what I'm most I dislike using the word passionate in a professional context, but what I'm most excited about, what I am determined to do is to connect dots between good people who are doing good work and who, when that good work gets done well, the community benefits. Literally, the community benefits. And when I look back over my 20 odd years, that's always been the consistent theme. How do I empower people in their lives, in their communities, to have what it is that they want in their life and in their environments?
Wow. I didn't know all of those things. That's very checkered, isn't it?
Very checkered.
I think the thing that I know you for is that that creating that connection, so empowering leaders to create that connection through impactful conversations, and that's one of the things that you've really helped me with. And I guess I want to kick off a conversation with how do you think those impactful conversations between community leaders, particularly community leaders in a regional place like Bundaberg, how does it really ignite change and foster a collaborative environment in a community? I'm going to throw that one at you straight away, and it's a pretty big question.
It's a massive question.
I feel like that was one of the big challenges for me as a community leader that I didn't know how to step into. So
Yeah. It's a massive question. And I think I'll start at the beginning. So change in community only happens with conversations. Part of the problem, though, is that we feel like we're just one person who is seeing all of the problems, who is worried about all of the things, who wishes it could be different, and we feel helpless. We feel like the parts that we're contributing are too small to make a difference. Those feelings of, I call it feelings of impotence, that feeling of not being able to do enough, can become really debilitating, and it's not true. It's not true, particularly in regional communities where the only thing that has ever made change is community leaders having conversations, rattling the cage, doing things, and encouraging other people to do things as well. So, one of the things that I noticed a lot when I entered local government as a public servant was that there are lots of people, lots of groups, lots of stakeholders all working towards the same outcomes, but all doing it from their own perspective, which is great. The part of me who wants to control and organise and coordinate resources wanted all of that to just come together, but that's never going to work because people want to have their own ways. And also, people need to hang out with people who are like them. Whether you play football or tennis, whether you're into bridge or dance, all of these different groups are really important. And rather than trying to force everyone to come together, what I saw in working in local government is the more we can empower people to have conversations that connect the dots and, I guess, line up the agendas in a way that the policymakers, the elected representatives, the industry associations can hear that collective message and take action, rather than all of those little fragmented groups feeling really frustrated that no one's listening to them and nobody's taking any notice of the things that need to change. So, to come back to your question of how important are impactful conversations, they're everything. They are they're everything. And not just to make the change, but to have people feel included in the communities. And I'm going to say too, it is through the conversations that we facilitate connections within communities. Anything else is just, I don't know, anything else is just slogans, and everything else is just marketing messages. It's the conversations that matter.
yeah, totally is. And I know after we started working together back 12 months ago, it really just clicked in my head after a few times that we talked. And one of the things that I was struggling with then, and by no means of the word have I overcome all of these struggles and challenges, but every day I see people really struggling to articulate their ideas in ways that inspire that collective audience and movement.
Mm.
Uh, and and I guess the question is, how can community advocates sharpen that communication skill? Like, what is it that can help them not only say what they need to say, but also say it in a powerful and
Mm.
challenging way so that people actually do stop and listen? And I know that you've got some personal stories on this, on where that's affected you and happened to you in the past. So, share your stories.
I'll share a story about when I was Brisbane's Chief Digital Officer, which actually had nothing to do with the IT systems and everything to do with being a figurehead, for want of a better word, role to support what we said at the time was the digital transformation of the city's economy. And what we meant by that was helping our small businesses in particular understand the opportunities that were before them with online stores, online selling, social media, etc., as well as supporting our startup ecosystem. And you've got to remember this is now the best part of, it was 2014. So it's 10 years ago. 10 years ago. And 10 years ago, Twitter was the kind of the early social media platform. We not every business had a website. If they did, it was still a brochure website. We really didn't understand what the opportunities were for social media, except for most of us, it was free and you could actually do some really powerful networking online, all those kind of things. So you've got to kind of cast your mind back. In fact, Uber hadn't even arrived in Brisbane that long ago. We were really grappling with all of those things. And one of the key things that I needed to keep talking about was the fact that this kind of innovation, this kind of experimentation that we were encouraging everyone to do was messy. There was no straight line strategic plan. You couldn't say, oh, we're starting here and we're going to get there and it's just going to be this sequential set of steps. And every time I would talk about it, I'd get some nods in the room, but people would also go, oh, I still don't really understand what he's talking about because Twitter and Facebook and all of the things. And in particular, the Lord Mayor at the time, I was serving with Lord Mayor Quirk. He was an older gentleman. He certainly did not understand what was going on, and he kind of didn't want to either. Like he was just like, this is not my thing. And he used to say to me all the time, Kat, I really do not understand what you're talking about, but it sounds really good. And you make it sound really exciting, so we're good. It was probably about 3 years into the role that he's on a stage that I'm also presenting at. And he says in his speech, as our Chief Digital Officer, Cat Matson, says, innovation is messy. And I just sat there for a moment and went, oh, I've got it. He's finally used my words. I'd been saying that phrase for 3 years, like it was over and over again. And so to hear him say that, what I got was I then had the opportunity to move even stronger into an innovation agenda. Like up until that point, it was all jargon and it was all futuristic. But as soon as he got that innovation was messy, I was able to bring in my next piece, which was open innovation, which was how do we actually bring the community together to solve the city's challenges, which we did. We did, and it was awesome. But his comfort level with that messiness was critical. So to come back to the question of how do community leaders get articulate and be more impactful in their communications, there's probably, I was about to count them off, but I'm not sure at the outset how many it's going to be. But the first piece is to really understand that community change in particular is a long-term game. You are going to need to say the same thing in a whole host of different ways until you feel like you have said it till you're blue in the face. And it's only then, it is only when you feel like you have said this thing ad nauseum that other people will start to go, oh, what's Gayle talking about there? I've heard her say that a couple of times now. I've heard it, and you're kind of sitting there going, a couple of times? A couple? So recognize that it's a long-term game. The second piece is to recognize what is that ultimate outcome that you're trying to take people towards, and what's the next step that you can take them down towards that ultimate outcome. I learned the hard way that trying to talk to people about, for example, open innovation was a step way too far, way too far. But having them understand that innovation was actually just doing new things to do things better, that was like, oh, okay, we can understand that. We can get that. So just taking people on micro steps rather than even the big, do you understand this? It's the literal micro steps. The other piece, I guess, is understanding what's in it for your stakeholder or for your listener. So in a community context like yours, every single elected member is going to have a different agenda. Every single stakeholder group will have a different agenda. Your residents will have a different agenda. Your corporate suppliers, your business members will have a different agenda. And all of those agendas are just as legitimate. One of the tendencies that we tend to have in community leadership is that we make certain agendas wrong because it's not what we want. But the moment you make it wrong, then it becomes a war. It becomes an us versus them. And as soon as it's an us versus them, then you're no longer listening to the other person, you're making them wrong, and you're then no longer taking them on the journey, you're just arguing with them. And arguing generally doesn't work. Ask any parent of a teenager.
I know that one. I know that one well. Yeah. I know that in a lot of the work that you do, you emphasize that clarity and influence in communication is key, and you spoke to some of that just now. How do you think communities and local organisations can use that sort of theory? Because it's all well and easy to say, oh yeah, just talk with clarity and influence in everything that you say, but that's harder said than done, because
It
a
really
lot of
is.
the time your audiences are different, and you don't know what stage they're at, and you don't really know what you need to be saying when, and it's tricky. It's hard to sometimes be able to really understand yourself, to be then
Mm-hmm.
able to engage and inspire your audience. So have you got any tips for little old local groups and community organisations and leaders that can help them achieve that clarity and influence?
Mm. Knowing that we've worked together now for over a year, I'm just trying to think what are the top tips that I can give in the context of a 40-minute podcast episode.
No
um,
pressure.
I think from a community organization perspective, the first thing I'm going to say is be clear on the current priority. And you heard me just say priority as a
Mm,
singular. If you have multiple priorities, they are no longer a priority. They're a list of things to do. And I know that for community groups, there are lots of things that you're addressing at any one time, all good and well. But what's the highest order thing that draws all of those other activities together? Why do you exist? What is your purpose? What is the thing that you are trying to solve in your community? Once you're clear on that highest order focus, that then sets your lighthouse, your North Star for all of your messaging. And what people tend to do when they think about speaking or when they think about communicating is they focus on the words. They think that's about a really clever use of words. It's not. It's about communicating the essence of your message. So, depending on the context, it might mean that you're having a very general conversation where you're listening to understand. And that, for anybody who has read Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, you'll know that that's habit number, I'm going to say 4. Yeah, it is. It's habit number 4. Seek first to understand, then to be understood. But what you might say in that listening is, from my perspective, this is my number one priority. I'd be really keen to understand what does that mean to you, or I'd be really keen to understand why you think that's impossible, or like it's perfectly okay to be. Let me rephrase. We often think that the only times we're impactful is when we're saying a perfectly scripted, perfectly crafted speech. We can actually be the most impactful when we're in conversation, coming from that place of focus, coming from that place of this is what I'm trying to facilitate. I guess the other piece there, and you hinted at it, all of our stakeholder groups are all at different stages and we don't know where they're at. Either listen to understand where they're at, what do they currently think, feel, know, or believe about this particular issue, or do a little bit of imaginary gestalt therapy. Ask yourself, what are they thinking? What if I were them? What would I be thinking? Based on what I see them do, what do they believe about this topic? When you can step into their shoes a little bit, walk a mile in my moccasins, you can shift your conversation to meet them where they're at rather than meet them where you think they should be. And I think that's the key thing. When we meet people where they're at, and kind of take them by the hand and walk them down the path rather than slap them in the head, kind of saying, this is what I think this is what I think you should think. It's far more effective holding someone's hand than it is bashing them around the head saying, you should think this.
Yeah, going back to that teenager analogy
Mm-hmm.
again.
Yeah, very much. Very
And
much.
you touched on it just then. It's the authenticity of those conversations, and that was, I think, one of the things that really drew me to keep engaging with you was that the fact that you gave me permission or you allowed me to be me. And I see this a lot in in not just in community groups or organizations, but everywhere in corporate land, everywhere you see is people putting on this front or this mask because they think they need to be someone that they're not. And as soon as you, I don't know if it's as a woman or if it's something else, but as soon as you have someone else give you that permission, it's like, yeah, thanks. I can do this as me. I don't have to pretend.
Well, and you're the one who's had the lived experience that has you be passionate about the things that you're passionate about. Like you're talking about the things that you talk about because they mean something to you, and they mean something to you because you've lived it or you've seen it or you've made the choices that you've made. You know, for example, I know that you've traveled the world and you've come back to Bundaberg because you love it and you love the sense of community. And so you will do everything you can to build and nurture that sense of regional community in your hometown. Knowing that story has me completely get what you're about and want to support you. I'm like, yes, that's exactly what regional towns are about. That message is far more enticing and appealing than an academic one, for example, which might be we've really got to stop the brain drain. We can't have all of our young people leaving as soon as they've hit 16 or 17 and going down to the big smoke. It's like, yeah, same message, but completely different emotional connection. Completely different emotional connection. So yeah, the authenticity piece is so powerful. And, you know, I talked before about, you know, the messages that you might spruik until you feel like you're blue in the face. For me at the moment, it's your stories matter. Your personal lived experience stories will connect you with your audience, will connect you with your cause far, far, far greater than any perfectly crafted speech or TEDx style thing you might do. Be real, be honest, and be genuinely you. And for most of us, that's also then genuinely curious. What's going on here? How can I make this situation better with what I've got? So yeah, the authenticity. Oh my goodness, it's key.
You definitely see it, and I notice it a lot when I go and listen to people when they're speaking that they've they're completely themselves, and you once it's pointed out to you, you really can have that more deeper connection and that more meaningful connection with what they're saying and who they are, and bringing in those stories like you mentioned about that history or that experience really, and it's all true and honest and at times quite vulnerable, and that's what makes it unique, and that's what makes it meaningful and engaging, and that's something that you've taught me and you've shown me, which I'm so grateful for. And I wish I had come across the work that you do, 10 years ago. It would have been so nice to be able to step into the world uh, as I am now then.
I do. I have so many people say that to me, and I do wonder though whether 10 years ago or whenever that point in time would have been for us, whether we knew then that we weren't being authentic. I think that from watching, it's like life beats it out of us. We so many of my clients are currently kind of going back to how they were when they were teenagers. I'm like, isn't it funny? Isn't it funny that it was there all along? But we leave school, we enter the workforce, we get married, we have kids, we have divorces, we do all of those things, and we kind of go, oh, I was there all along, but I was buying into these scripts. I was buying into these, this is how you should be. And maybe not everyone does. I seem to only work with the people who do. But yeah,
Well, I think
there's a lot of shooting on us. We get shooted on from all directions, and I think coming back to, oh no, hang on, I'm perfectly good, and I've got lots of good stuff to share. That's a nice moment.
yeah, and I think you're right. I think that 10 years ago, I would have had the tunnel vision on. And that moment in time, that was where I was, and I wasn't looking at being anything other than that. So,
Yeah.
everything happens at the right time when it's meant to. And, every day is a learning day. So, and unlocking that potential in yourself is so rewarding, and
Mm-hmm.
it brings those moments so much more meaning. And I wish that that we could spread that message more, which is, one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on today's podcast, so more people can get to know you and who you are and what you do and the impact that you have on our ability to communicate and to be able to communicate with impact. So tell me more about impactful projects and impactful presenters, and what it means to you and how it came about. And
Oh, well, impactful presenters is kind of the origin story for this series of entities. Impactful presenters came about because it was a COVID baby, actually, as I explained it to somebody yesterday. Um, I had been sitting in public service by that stage for 7 years, and so many people were saying to me, Kat, how do you speak? How do you speak so confidently? How do you speak so well? All those kind of things. And what I'd noticed in my 7 years of being in local government was that the people who are most effective, who get a voice at the decision making table, aren't any smarter, any more intelligent, any more qualified, any more wiser. They're just more articulate. And I don't mean perfectly articulate. I don't mean Brene Brown or Martin Luther King style. I just mean they know how to be heard. Turns out I know how to be heard as well, but not everybody does. And so what I kind of listened to the questions that people kept asking me. And when the world went online, I was like, oh, there's my opportunity to create the Impactful Presenters program, which is exactly what I did. Fast forward a couple of years when I had now been running that business as a side business while I was still working in the public sector. And I was making the decision to leave the public sector and actually go into the business full time. And so I needed a corporate entity. And what I wanted to do within the corporate entity was still be open to other projects that took my fancy, that weren't just about the speaking skills. And so that's what Impactful Projects was all about. And the reason the impact piece is so consistent and so important for me, and it goes back to what I said earlier about being impotent, I have always been about potency, always about making an impact. How can I bring my talents, my skills, my expertise to any group, any organization, any community, and empower them in the most impactful way possible? And so, for example, one of the things that I'm now doing under Impactful Projects is open innovation consulting to other councils, which is essentially changing how we solve city challenges or regional challenges and using the local community's expertise and businesses and insights to solve the more challenging problems rather than what we tend to often do, which is go to tender, go to the big end of town and just, do that. So, yeah, impactful projects just gives me flexibility to do whatever takes my fancy. Impactful presenters lets me continue to work with people like you other corporate hippies, humble leaders, public servants, and business owners to show up authentically in the world and communicate, however they communicate, in a way that they can be heard so they can contribute to the conversations that matter.
I love that so much. I think that's so amazing. And what I really love about that is the fact that you've got all this background and experience, and you're talking and creating a way that can bring that public service space back down into community, where the grassroots, the ground level, where it's actually happening, and make that matter. And
Mm-hmm.
that's one of the things that I really love. Because I haven't always been in this space either. I've worked in other spaces, and it's really only now that I've been working in this space for a few years where I recognise and celebrate these grassroots ground level communities, that they they do have the answers. They actually have what we need to know, and they're passionate, and they love it, and they would do anything that they can. And I really love that you're able to bridge those two things together. And I think that there's real uh, a future in that
Mm.
way of creating not only economic development but also community level development for our regional and metropolitan areas.
Well, and this is my thing, Gail. We when we look at economic development as only, I'm going to say, profit orientated, and I know it's not, but when it's only about the number of jobs that are being brought to the region, or it's only about the economic impact, we're missing the point, and we're missing the point that economic development can actually be community development, and community development can actually be economic development. And good economic development would mean that we don't need the saving style of community development, and by that I mean that, the rescuing or the helping the people who have been left out. So true economic development should bring all of it together. I've seen it happen, and there's many reasons why it's hard for it to be facilitated in that way. And this podcast is not the place to go down all of those rabbit holes. But I do recognize that it takes a little bit of translation, and it takes a little bit of dot connecting, and it takes a bit of facilitation, and it takes a lot of patience, because it is complicated and you need to listen to a lot of different voices, and collaboration and community collaboration. Ooh, you can't just tick that box off your to-do list at the end of the week and say, yeah, we did that. So I think it's really important work, and I'm lucky enough to have spent time in both parts of the world, and I can see how both parts work. So I'm able to bring that translation piece together and that dot connecting piece, and I get to have a ball while I'm at it.
How exciting, and how exciting for those areas and regions that take up that opportunity to have that facilitated, and even just to start that journey to learn about the insights of what that looks like. This series, the Community Centred Solutions series, came about because we wanted to talk to all of the local community organisations in Bundaberg and the leaders, and how they were working together, and celebrate the things that they had done and the collaborative projects that they'd worked on. And this will be episode 11. And so all our previous episodes are all about that work. And I think it's a really unique piece now, because I'm talking to you about, well, now that we've talked about all of this stuff, now, well, what's next? And how does the next piece happen? And how do we look outside of our region to go, well, how do we do the next steps and stages? And so that's exciting.
It
Well
is
done.
exciting. Thanks. Thank you.
Yeah, really well done. Well, is there anything else you would like to add to our chat today?
Oh my goodness, there is lots, but 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 we could be here forever. I
I
think
know.
I think probably to close it out, what community influence can feel so I'm going to say haphazard and messy. Like I really get that for all sides of the equation. You know, people running community groups feel forever like they're under-resourced and, you know, always scrambling. The government organisations, you know, they're trying to get their jobs done, but at the same time, it's like, oh my goodness, there's another community group who's asking us for this and asking us for that. Like, how do we deal? How do we prioritise? What's more important? The elected representatives in the region are also, you know, they're always feeling like they're putting out fires and dealing with another. Oh. And then there's the people like you who are trying to pull all those pieces together and go, but how do we actually make good stuff happen? It's messy. It's messy. And it's meant to be. It's meant to be messy. If you try to sanitize it, if you try to get the messy out, then it's no longer community and it's a process. So being okay with the messiness and persisting anyway, I think is really important. And just because it's messy doesn't mean it's not making progress. I think that's the other thing. Like, you've just got to keep going and being, you know, the messiness is not the issue. It's whether or not you're being heard, and whether or not you're making progress.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I needed to hear that today because it's the end of a week. And I came into this episode thinking, oh my goodness, it's Friday afternoon. Like I'm exhausted after a big week, but that's because it was a messy week. And it was a hard, messy week, but it was definitely worthwhile. There's nothing I would change about the week.
Yep.
And again, you've taught me a lesson. It's okay. It's okay to be settled in the chaos and the messiness.
Well, yeah, like it's not McDonald's, right? Like the old-fashioned McDonald's. New McDonald's is messy. Old McDonald's used to be there were 5 burgers on the menu. You'd order it, you could upsize it. That was it. It's not that. It's not a mathematical equation. You're dealing with people, and humans are messy, and that's okay. That's actually part of the beauty. That is literally part of the beauty, and it's also why, even when we're looking to other regions or other cities for inspiration, it's really important that we don't just pick up somebody else's solution and plop it in, because it won't fit, because it's not the same. You can take the inspiration, you can take the lessons, but everything does need to be crafted locally.
Absolutely.
Off my soapbox now. I'll get off my soapbox.
No, we love it. I love it. I wish we could talk for a longer time, but let's wrap things up then now. Thank you for joining me. How do people reach out to you? Where do they find you? Because I'm sure that there'll be people listening who are like, I need to talk to this person. So tell us where they find you.
So if you're a social media junkie like me, you can find me on LinkedIn, Facebook, or Instagram. Simply look for Cat Matson, and Cat is with a C, as in meow. And it really is Cat, C-A-T. My websites are impactfulpresenters.com and catmatson.com.au. And if you Google me, sad to say, you'll get me. My digital footprint's pretty good. So just Google me. Yeah, you'll find me.
Awesome. Thanks, Kat. Thank you for sticking around to the end of this episode. If you would like to listen to future episodes, you can follow or subscribe to Welcome to Bundaberg on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, and on our socials, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok at Welcome to Bundaberg.